When the pilots passed out on the flight, a 14-year-old boy took control, and what he did while flying left everyone in tears. It was a gray morning when Flight 742 of the international airline took off from Miami International Airport. The plane was heading for the holiday destination of many passengers, traveling for about 9 hours until its arrival in Europe. The journey started off calmly. Inside the cabin, passengers were relaxed, absorbed in their own thoughts. Some were chatting excitedly about holiday plans, while others, more tired, took the opportunity to sleep. Among them was Liam Johnson, a 14-year-old boy sitting by the window, watching the clouds as he flipped through a book about airplanes. Liam had been fascinated by airplanes since he was very young. He wasn't the type of child who spent his time playing video games or playing soccer in the street. Instead, he spent hours watching documentaries about airplanes and how they worked. He dreamed of becoming a pilot since he was 6, when he had his first commercial flight. The hum of the engines and the sensation of being in the air became something magical to him. For him, every airplane trip was an opportunity to closely observe the reality he one day hoped to be a part of. This flight was no different. He was excited to be on an international flight, feeling closer to his dream of flying. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. About 2 hours after takeoff, something unexpected occurred. In the cockpit, the captain and the co-pilot began to feel unwell. The captain, a veteran with over 30 years of experience, complained of a severe headache. He tried to ignore the symptoms, but soon started sweating cold and feeling weak. The co-pilot, who was younger with only a few years of experience, began to feel increasingly dizzy, with blurry vision and difficulty breathing. Within minutes, both lost consciousness, falling inactive, unable to act. The plane was now pilotless, flying in international airspace with no one qualified to control it. Panic spread among the crew. The chief flight attendant tried to communicate with the cockpit, but the cockpit door was locked and couldn't be opened. She contacted the other flight attendants, who were on the other side, unsure of what to do. The atmosphere was filled with chaos. The plane continued its trajectory, with no one able to make critical decisions. The chief flight attendant, with a trembling voice, announced over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that everyone remain calm. We are dealing with an emergency situation. Please stay in your seats." But, as she spoke, her voice betrayed the growing panic, and the passengers didn't know what to expect. It was at this moment that Liam realized something was wrong. He felt a tightness in his chest and a strange sensation, as though something was about to happen. He stood up and, without quite knowing why, walked over to the cockpit door. What he didn't know was that this simple movement would change everything. "Are you okay, Liam?" asked one of the flight attendants, panic disguised behind a calm mask. She noticed Liam's fixed gaze on the cockpit door, and in a split second, panic took over her as well. I know a little about airplanes," Liam replied, his voice slightly trembling but with a spark in his eyes that made her realize he wasn't just speaking idly. With no other options, the flight attendant made a bold decision. "Can you help us? We need someone who knows a little about how to control the plane." With his heart racing, Liam didn't hesitate. He had always dreamed of this moment, but never imagined he would have to use it. I can try," he said, more to himself. The flight attendant guided him to the cockpit door, which was opened. Liam stepped inside, and the sight of the cockpit left him speechless. The lights were flashing, the monitors were showing quick data, and the levers and buttons seemed like a huge puzzle. But he knew there was no time to lose. He sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the controls in front of him. The chief flight attendant watched closely, her hands sweating from nervousness, as Liam began to remember everything he had learned during his years of self-study. Calm and determined, he adjusted the controls, trying to understand what was happening. The sky outside the window seemed immense, and the plane was flying higher and higher. He knew he needed to act quickly, but at the same time, an inexplicable calm took over his body. He looked at the instruments and, realizing the plane was at a safe altitude, began to do what he had always read about handling an emergency situation. Gently, he adjusted the rudder and throttle, managing to stabilize the aircraft. However, he knew this was only the beginning. If he didn't make the right decisions, everyone on board would be in danger. The pressure was mounting, but he couldn't give up. He took a deep breath, remembering the lessons from aviators he had always admired. He remembered his greatest idol, a pilot who had spoken about staying calm in emergencies, and that's exactly what he did. He needed more than just technique. He needed courage. With the chief flight attendant's help, Liam made contact with air traffic control. They were stunned to hear the young boy's voice on the other end, but Liam's firm and calm tone convinced them to help him. Instructions started coming in quickly, and Liam focused entirely, putting every bit of knowledge into action. Over the next few hours, he slowly descended, following the controller's instructions, while the plane made its way toward the nearest airport. However, what truly amazed everyone was how he handled the situation. While flying the plane, Liam began to communicate with the passengers. He knew fear could take over them, so with a calm voice, he explained what was happening. He talked about his dreams of becoming a pilot, how much he loved aviation, and how, in that moment, he was doing what he had always dreamed of. Liam's words, sincere and full of sparkle, began to calm the passengers. Many of the adults, with tears in their eyes, listened attentively. They knew they were in good hands, despite the apparent improbability of the situation. When the moment came, and the plane finally neared the runway, Liam felt the weight of responsibility. Every move had to be perfect, and despite being just a boy, he knew that the lives of everyone were in his hands. With the air traffic control tower guiding him precisely, he adjusted the controls and made the smoothest landing possible. When the plane's wheels touched the ground, the relief was immediate. The plane had landed safely, and, in an act of pure emotion, the passengers stood and began applauding. The sound of clapping echoed throughout the cabin, but the silence that followed was even deeper. The flight attendant who had asked for help rushed to him, still in shock. She embraced him tightly, her eyes full of tears. "You did it. You made it," she whispered, emotion overtaking her. The pilots, who had recovered, were astonished to learn what had happened. They could never have imagined that someone so young had taken control and landed the plane with such skill. But the real story wasn't about the pilots. It was about the 14-year-old boy who, in a moment of crisis, not only saved lives but inspired everyone around him with his courage and determination. While the plane was safely on the ground, Liam felt an indescribable pride. He knew that, on that day, he had fulfilled his mission. And more than that, he knew his dream of becoming a pilot was now closer than ever. He was no longer just a dreamer. He was a hero. "I just followed my dream," he said, smiling, with his eyes shining. Applauded by everyone, Liam walked down the airport corridor, his heart overflowing with emotion. He knew that from that moment on, his dream of flying was no longer just a distant idea. He had already taken the first step toward his true mission, and who knows what the future held for him.